Yeah, just going big picture stuff here. I think something that really stood out to me was how fast this Xavier team is already playing on the offensive end. Now, some of that resulted in them turning the ball over 20-something times. That wasn't great. But a lot of those turnovers, I didn't even think were necessarily because they were trying to play fast. I thought some of it were because guys were doing things that either looked like they weren't, like Dalen Swain trying to cross over slowly in front of the defender and just get his pocket picked. Desmond Claude threw like a couple weird passes in that game. There were some things that just seemed like almost careless errors and things that should definitely be cleaned up. But again, this is a group of guys who haven't really played together, that are running out different lineups that they haven't used much at all in practice for the first time. So I'm willing to let a lot of the sloppiness go. I would say the fact that they're able to play so fast and they already seem to understand how to do that, especially Davion McKnight. Davion McKnight seemed really comfortable with how the system worked. When it was time to push it and go for his or go for a quick shot and throw the ball ahead, or when it was time to fly it up, probe a little bit, but then back it back out and get into the offense and run it. He seemed to have a great feel for that. And even if, again, the second game was terrible, but he had like 10 assists, 2 turnovers, I think, in that second game. Really impressive stuff from a guy who is just starting to get into your offense a little bit. And you're telling him, hey, we want to go fast, push the ball up the court as quickly as you can. He's doing that. He's listening to you. And he seems to have a good feel already for what you want out of him. I was really impressed with that from both Davion and the entire Xavier offense, the way they were able to fly up the court and play really quickly.
Well, their decision-making was good, and their aggressiveness was really good. And we've talked so much in the last 2 years that Sean Miller wants to get guys that are tough, that can get to the foul line, right, that shoot a lot of free throws, stretch the game out at the foul line, and can score at the foul line. Thank God we don't have a ton of people on the message board complaining about the free throw shooting, because they shot their free throws phenomenally well down there in the Bahamas. I think a lot of Xavier fans would probably whatever they did down there in that ballroom, if we could just magically make that happen in the Big East, I think a lot of fans would be the message board would be nirvana if that happened in the Big East.
Yeah, definitely. And then to that point, I think that is going to be something interesting to watch with the Xavier team, because if you look at that first half against UVic, they only took 4 3-pointers. They were 1 for 4 from 3-point range. And I think that's too few. I think they want to shoot more threes than that. But that is part of who this team is. If Trey Green isn't out on the floor, Quincy Oliveri is kind of the only shooter that they have out there. He's the only guy that's really looking to get quick threes up. The rest of the guys, there's a couple other ones, Desmond Claude, Davion McKnight, that I feel could shoot it. Reed Descharme, as he gets some more minutes, they can shoot it, but they're not shooters at heart. That's not their mindset necessarily. So part of the interesting part about the Xavier offense is going to be, one, how often do they get to the free throw line, as you're talking about? They got to shoot the free throws well, because they're going to get there a lot, it seems like. And 2, I know Sean Miller is a big analytics guy. I know he loves Ken Pom. And I know almost every college coach right now will tell you, we want close twos, easy twos, like dunks and layups right at the rim, or we want 3-point shots. We don't want a lot of tough mid-range jumpers or floaters or runners, because it's an inefficient way to play basketball. But when you look at the Xavier team, it's like Davion McKnight is a great mid-range player. Desmond Claude looks like he's going to be a great mid-range player. You've got some of these big guys that are probably going to, I don't know if they're going to score a lot in the mid-range, but can maybe shoot the mid-range jumper a little bit. Kachienze had a nice mid-range jumper in one of those games. So I'm curious to see how much they're going to play from the mid-range this year, because that's something that you don't see a lot in today's college basketball game, but it seems like it really suits this team.
To your point about taking more threes, I kind of wanted them to take more threes too, just to open up the spacing on the floor. If you're going to drive that much, if you're going to see Trey Green, if you're going to see Oliveri, if you're going to see McKnight especially, if you're going to see these guys get to the rim, they need space to be able to get to the rim. And even if you're not making all of your threes, even if this team doesn't shoot the ball as well as last year's team, right? Even if they're not going to go out there and make 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 threes a game. I mean, if they're not going to go out there and do that, you still at least at some point got to take a few to keep the defense honest that you're going to be able to do that, to stretch the floor, to open things up, to allow that space for those guys to drive. But still, in a game like this where you want to see the ability of some of these guys to be able to finish, to get to the rim, and can you convert? Trey Green, liked what I saw out of him. And what I really, really liked, that this is not reinventing the wheel here, but Desmond Claude looked like the real deal. He looked really, really good.
Yeah, I thought Desmond's handle looked ridiculous.
Yes.
how tight his
he
handle
looked,
has gotten.
he looked under control. He looked very poised. He knew when to attack, when to distribute. He knew when he wanted to attack. He knew what angle to go at. I just all those things combined about what he brought to the table in that UVic game. I just really liked his flow.
And that's everything we've heard from people who have been inside workouts all this summer. Everyone's been like, Desmond Claude looks like the real deal. Best player in the gym most days. The few practices that I've been to leading up to this trip to the Bahamas, same exact thing. Desmond Claude has looked awesome. So this didn't catch anyone off guard. I don't think that he looked great, but it was fun to watch in person. Because even in that first game, like he got in early foul trouble, which Sean kind of talked about after the game. He's like, he's got to be smarter than that. And he also had like too many turnovers, quite honestly, and it got sloppy. It's like, if he eliminates that stuff, what a ridiculous performance he would have had in that first game. And it made it look so easy, you know? So I am anxious to see what Desmond Claude looks like midway through this season, because I feel like he is going to fit into that Colby Jones role very well for this team. He can do a lot of the same things in the half court. You can put him in the same sort of position, same type of spot in the offense, so to speak, and try to get him the same looks that you got Colby last year. And I think physically he's very similar. Handle-wise, I think he's even better than Colby was. Shooting-wise, probably not where Colby was last year. He's probably still working his way up to get to that point, but I think it's in there eventually. I think he can do a lot of similar things to Colby Jones. I think that's really where this is headed for him and Xavier's offense.
What other, big picture takeaways? Let's talk about the big men a little bit. Kachienze, Abu Usman, what we saw to them, some of the rebounding, some of the putbacks that we saw. Logan Duncombe got some good run in there as well. What were your thoughts in the front court? Because I know that's been a big topic of discussion. Yeah,
on the message board, people have been really wringing their hands about the play of the big men, or the rumors of the play of the big men in summer workouts and practices. And I understand that. Like, definitely, I've heard the guards are ahead of the bigs. And what we saw in the Bahamas was exactly that. Davion McKnight looked good. Quincy Oliveri looked good. Desmond Claude looked really good. Even some of the backup guards. Trey Green had some great moments off the bench. The front court, I thought, was okay. I didn't think they looked bad in the Bahamas, but I also think they didn't stand out against pretty bad competition. So that's a little bit concerning. They look a little stiff. But Kachienze, or Enze, I listen to their pronunciations. If you go to Xavier's roster, they say it by themselves. You can click on a little ear next to their name so you can hear their pronunciation. So we've been calling Kachienze this whole time, like Z-A-Y. If you listen to him, he pronounced it more like Kachienze. So, like, I don't know exactly how it's said, but I'll try to correct myself as we go. So bear with me on that. But I thought he is clearly the best or most impressive out of the three big men right now. Even though he's only a freshman, I thought rebounding-wise, he really goes and gets the ball out of his area. And defensively, he looked great. Offensively, I don't know that he's going to be able to give you much of anything off the bat. But in terms of the rebounding and defense, I think right now he is their best big man.
I had the same impression. It was tough to get a read on Logan Duncombe just because I felt like some of his sequences were kind of awkward. Some of when he was coming down the court, I didn't feel like it was maybe the best. I didn't feel like it was the best takeaway for him, just in the way that he was out there on the court.
So I think with Logan, he does not look the part, right? Like he's just not going to stand out. His athleticism isn't. Plus, his size isn't great overall. Like, he's not a lot bigger than guys, not a lot longer, not a lot more athletic. So when you watch him on the court, he does not stand out. He does not necessarily look the part. But something I have seen from him a little bit, and there are some moments like this in the University of Victoria game. Sometimes being the best for your team is just making the fewest amount of mistakes, right? Like, some of Xavier's backup big men last year could have learned from that. Like, just go on the floor and be solid in what you're being asked to do. You don't have to do anything that stands out. Just don't screw it up while you're out there. Don't miss the block out that leads the other team getting a rebound. Don't miss the defensive assignment. I thought there were some things Logan Duncombe did, both in the practice leading up that I saw and while they're in the Bahamas, where it's like, well, he doesn't stand out. He doesn't give you a lot extra, but some of these other guys are missing things. They're not doing things right. And there's an interesting moment in the University of Victoria game where he's kind of under the basket, not in great position, but he really boxed out hard, ends up getting an over the back call on a guy. And it's like, or a rebounding foul on the guy. Not really an over the back call, but I just think it's some of those things like that may give Logan a chance. If he's just really solid in his role, he's not going to look the part necessarily. And I think, like Abu Usman is a better defender than him. And I think Kachienze is certainly a much better athlete and overall talent than him right now. But if he's just really solid, he's in the mix. And I don't think there's a clear leader in this battle in the front court right now. So, that's going to be one of the more interesting things to watch leading up to the start of the season. Is I don't really think anything is set in the front court just yet. I think all of those guys could kind of play their way in or out of more minutes as things currently stand.
Yeah, totally agree. Any other takeaways, Rick? I know you had a bunch of thoughts on the Bahamas. So what else do you want to get into?
Let's talk about the freshman class real quick. So we've talked a bit already. Who was the most impressive out of the freshmen to you?
I liked what I saw in limited time. And again, I tried to go back and make some notes as much as I could. I liked what I saw limited time out of Dalen Swain. I thought he just looked kind of under control in a couple of different sequences there. I don't know how much you're going to get out of him right away, but I thought at least he wasn't as far behind the 8 ball as I guess I was maybe. I don't know, that it's hard to say that, but when I haven't seen anything, right? You've been to the practices. I haven't seen the practices at all. This was my first opportunity to watch any of these guys. I'm trying to go back and think if there were any. Trey Green is the obvious answer, right? I think Trey. I think Trey is what he did offensively, like getting to the rim, knowing where he was supposed to be on the floor, his ability to shoot, being aggressive, getting to the foul line. Trey, far and away, was the obvious answer here. He's somebody that you can tell. In fact, I texted somebody right away. I was a half in, and I texted somebody and I said that, yeah, this Trey Green guy he's the real deal. And there was no doubt about that.
So I've loved Trey Green's game. I have not made any bones about that when talking about him on the message board or the site after he committed. I've loved his game. Now, there are definitely concerns when you're bringing in like a 5'10". He's listed at 6 foot. He's definitely not 6 foot.
He's not.
Yeah, 5'10" point guard or whatever he is. There are going to be concerns. And I have concerns about his defense. He doesn't stay in front of people all that well. And just his lack of size is going to be a problem. But sometimes it's just a guy's makeup that it's going to work out for him. Like the skill set and the athleticism, all that is great. You got to have it. But sometimes the makeup is what you really need to see. And Trey Green is just one of those guys where it's like he never stops coming at you. He thinks he's the best player on the floor. He's going to shoot it every time you give him a little bit of space. Like he checked into that first game against University of Victoria. The first possession on the court, he brings the ball up the court as the point guard, dishes it off, relocates, goes off a flare screen, catches it, takes a step in, shoots a mid-range jumper and swishes it. And like in the second half, one of his first few possessions in the game, he comes down, he's on the right side, he gets a ball screen from Logan Duncombe. The defender guarding him goes underneath of it. He starts to go into the offense like, okay, I'm just going to go around. Wait a second. Did that guy just go under the screen? Hold on a second. Let me step back from like 25 here and just bury this 3 now. That's what I love about Trey Green. It's just extreme confidence. If you give him any room, he's going to attack you and use it against you. And he doesn't back down. He has toughness. Again, not great defensively, but at least he's going to give you effort and toughness on the defensive end. And so I think Trey Green is their most impressive freshman. And certainly in the Bahamas, I thought he lived up to that with his microwave scoring ability. And as I already talked about, Quincy Oliveri is your only shooter in the starting lineup if you use the starting lineup that you used in the Bahamas. So having Trey Green to bring in off the bench is going to be something that I think this team needs right away.
Yeah, Trey Green is going to be special in a Xavier uniform. I think you can mark that down, and he's going to be very fun to watch too. He's not somebody that's necessarily a grinder, and he is going to go out there and be a fun basketball player to watch night in and night out.
Well, and you see a lot of guys like this in college basketball. The smaller point guard who can just boogie with the ball, right? Break you down off the dribble, call their own number, hit those crazy tough shots, lead the game at the end. I mean, to extent, kind of like a Tu Holloway type player, right? He didn't have that quickness, the water bug aspect to him, but he was kind of like that guy that you put the ball in his hands. You didn't necessarily have to call play for him. He was just a dog and he'd go make something happen for you. And there's been so many guys like that in college basketball, but when is the last time Xavier had that at the point guard position? When's the last time Xavier had a point guard who could knock down the 3 consistently and who could just go make his own shot out of nothing? Just go create offense.
Yeah.
Really, honestly, I don't know maybe two Holloway, right?
Well, Sule Boom did a decent job last year of shooting and spacing the floor, but not in the same sense that Trey Green can go out there and do it now.
Well, I think Sule Boom is the right. I mean, I was talking more before Sean Miller. You're right about Sule Boom, but yes, I think Sule Boom is similar to Trey Green in a lot of ways. So that's a pretty good comparison. But it's like going back before the Sean Miller era.
Oh, sorry, you kind of cut out and from my side. So if you said that,
no, I didn't say that.
Okay.
But I was just thinking like they haven't really recruited a point guard. You know, they brought in Sule as a transfer, but like in terms of recruits and guys that have come up through the program, who is the last guard they brought in that was kind of like that you got to see develop? And it's like, you know, there are some opportunities that maybe like a Quentin Gooden you thought might have turned into that or something, but it just hasn't really materialized for them in a long time where they've had like that type of player. And I think Trey Green is that type of guy. So I'm really excited about watching him develop. So the second most impressive guy, I think, is the most fun part here, because had you asked me that question going into the offseason or even after watching practices leading up to the Bahamas on Friday or Saturday, had you asked me who is the second most impressive freshman after Trey Green, I would have probably said Dalen Swain. And definitely after watching practice for a few days, I would have said Dalen Swain because he looked really impressive, looked really good in practice. He did not play very well down in the Bahamas. So I'm not like ready to knock him down a peg and be like, oh, Dalen Swain's going to struggle or anything like that. I'm not reading too much into that. I still think Dalen Swain probably has the highest upside out of any of the freshmen right now, except for maybe Lazar Djokovic. We can talk about that more. But like out of the guys who were already committed in the original class, Dalen Swain probably had the highest upside. Didn't play all that well in the Bahamas. I think right now, if you're asking me who I'm most confident in that they will work out of the freshmen right now, I go Trey Green and then I go Kashi. Like, I just think his size, length, athleticism, and the way he plays, which is all out, runs the floor hard, and really rebounds out of his area, that almost always works. Like, I mean, he might be limited on the offensive end. We'll see how he develops in that regard, but what he can do, I think already works at the high major level. So I would say Kashi is kind of my revelation from the Bahamas as the second most impressive freshman.
Yeah, I thought going back and watching, like I said, when you asked me who was the most impressive, and I was talking about Dalen Swain, I thought he had a couple of sequences where you could at least see like the flash in the pan, right? Where you could see, okay, there's something there. Yep. But as far as consistency over the course of an entire game, I can't agree with you more that how encouraging is it too that you're seeing it both out on the perimeter in Trey Green and then in the post in NZ too, where you're getting that dynamic where we're not sitting here and saying, oh man, Xavier has so much talent outside, but it's going to be a log jam because they have 4 perimeter players, and where are you going to get all those guys in? Now all of a sudden you have somebody who we weren't really sure what to expect out of Kashi, right? He committed, didn't have a whole lot of fanfare when he committed, and now all of a sudden he's on the team and he goes in practice and now in a game where, you know, you talked about him and said he can go out there and produce, and he's looked apart.
I feel like we know more about Lazar Djokovic coming in than we did about Kashi Enze when he committed. I'm being dead serious. There was like no film of Kashi.
There was nothing. Yeah.
And like I barely saw him play. So I had very low I shouldn't say low expectations. I had no expectations. I didn't know what to expect from him at all. I would say he's completely exceeded whatever I thought he was going to be.
Rick, the one guy that we haven't talked a ton about here, you mentioned his name real quick, but any thoughts on Reed Ducharme?
Yeah, you know, that's an interesting one because, again, we're mentioning all these other guys. So it's like, okay, well, is Reed the least impressive? It's like, well, Reed scored 17 points in that second game. And again, against raw talent, elite, whatever. But I don't care. Anytime a freshman comes in and one of his first couple of exhibition games, he puts up 17 points. He only misses 2 of his shots and knocks down a couple of threes. Gets in the see, the thing about Reed Ducharme is a lot of people call him a shooter. And I've always said he's more, I don't want to use this name because people think so highly of him, but he's more JP Makira in terms of his game than he is like spot up shooter. You know, he's more of like hit the ball, knock it loose, dive on the floor, foul you but doesn't get called for it, flops a little bit, like shows some toughness, all those types of things. That's more who he is. That's where his value comes in, more so than in him knocking down 6 threes in a game or something like that. So while I think he can shoot and he's a streaky shooter that can get hot from the outside, I think his overall value comes in some of the other stuff. So to see him score like that and shoot it pretty well like that is interesting because, again, it's like when you're looking at this freshman class now, we're talking about 5 guys here. And if you made an argument about any of the 5 and said, I think they're going to be a really good player in the Big East one day, I don't really have much to argue against there. Like, yeah, there's still a lot to be proven by all these guys. I'm not ready to talk about what an epic class this is or anything. They've got a lot to prove, but at the same time, it really looks to have some depth because all of these guys look capable at the moment.